June 18th, 1945, Maida Escarpment, Okinawa. Water ticks from the cave roof like a metronome, and the boy's rifle stock drinks the damp. Nakashima Kiyoshi is 15, small for his age, fingers cramped around a Type 99, 7.7 by 58 millimeters, 5-round internal magazine, 1 cartridge tonight. The limestone breathes rot and cordite. Outside, American artillery is less a sound than weather rolling the ridge. Leaflets came earlier, pale moths at the cave mouth, lay down arms, humane treatment, food. The sergeant ground them beneath his boot and said the Americans were liars. The lie smelled like coffee. He was a schoolboy a month ago, runner for the 32nd Army now, catechized in 2 answers, advance or die. A Type 89 grenade discharger leans in a corner, muzzle cap pitted. He has watched men ask it for a miracle and bruise their thighs for the trouble. The bullhorn from the slope below repeats itself in careful Japanese, like a clerk reading train times. He tells himself Americans don't keep promises. He tells himself he won't be taken. In the dark, he believes both things. Rain presses the ridge. Flares open like slow flowers and fold again. He listens for an order that will turn fear into motion. Instead, there is shuffling down the tunnel, someone whispering his name, and an older private pushes a strip of rice into his hand. They chew without looking. The loudspeaker says rice and medical care with a clerk's calm, as if those things exist in the world the way air exists, as if logistics were a kind of mercy. The first Marine voice reaches the cave not as a shout, but as procedure. Come out, hands high. Kiyoshi rubs the bolt, feels grit, thinks of his mother's hands, wonders if surrender is a word or a betrayal. The sergeant spits, yanks at a grenade. The pin sticks. The old man stares at it, then at the boy. A mortar coughs and dust lifts like breath. Kiyoshi does what a runner would do. He runs, sideways, through a lime-white fissure he mapped with his eyes on a different night. Wet air hits his face. The world outside smells of rain and diesel. Downslope, engines idle in a rhythm that suggests discipline, not haste. Somewhere out there is a ramp that clangs, a boat called a Higgins that eats surf like routine, men with rifles that load 8 rounds at a click you can hear even in dreams. He palms the single cartridge like a charm and decides not to die for someone else's picture of honor. Above him, the bullhorn repeats the same promise with bureaucratic patience. You will be fed. He does not believe it yet, but he listens. June 21st, 1945, Okinawa's lee shore. Diesel, wet canvas, the salt sting that lives in wool. Private Jack Donnelly, military police, braces in the well deck as the LCVP noses through chop, a square-jawed metronome of American order. 36 men or a jeep and a dozen, 36 feet of wood and steel, 12 knots when the helmsman trusts the sea. Specifications have a way of calming a farm kid from Iowa. The ramp slams down and the world becomes mud, shouted numbers, and the steady clatter of an M1 Garand's N-block clips kissing deck plates like coins. They bring them in handfuls at first, boys in school caps under tattered tunics, some with bayonets taped to broom handles, one with a primer full of kanji tucked beside a knife. Donnelly's job is perimeter and paperwork. He keeps his pencil sharp and his questions short. Name, unit, weapons, wounds. Mispronunciations die in his throat when the Nisei corporal steps up. Corporal. Kenji Ken Tanaka of the Military Intelligence Service, a California cadence in perfect Japanese. Tanaka's voice lowers shoulders, slows breathing, makes the column behave like a line instead of a panic. Rain walks across the lagoon in silver curtains. The bullhorn plays the same message for the 10th time, and it still sounds like a promise that will be kept, because everything here is a promise kept. Boats on schedule, chow on time, ammunition where it needs to be. Donnelly watches a medic unwrap a boy's foot, sees trench rot yield to iodine, and realizes logistics has a smell. coffee, oil, canvas, and institutional soap. A teen with eyes like a cornered deer touches the Garron's walnut stock as if asking permission to wake up. Donnelly lets him look. 8 rounds, .30-06, 24-inch barrel, about 9.5 pounds. He explains it the way his father explained a seed drill. The boy nods once, as if understanding that any rifle built by the millions can't be argued with for long. A Higgins boat yawns back out. Another comes in. The metronome continues. When the roster reaches a column, they added that morning, juvenile. Donnelly puts 3 names there without letting his face show what he feels. He files the pages in a folder slick with rain and writes the same note he will write a dozen times before the month is done. Transport pending, rations issued. The word rations is long on the page. It does not feel like mercy. It feels like a system too big to fail. Late June into July 24th, 1945. Stockade to Saipan to Oahu, a chain of custody that is also a chain of supply. Twilight on deck, steel warm from the day, the sea combing itself into dark lanes. Kiyoshi stands beneath a ventilator and learns the smell of American ships, coffee that never runs out, oil that never dries, bread that appears after you sleep. A bosun barks, sailors shoulder a crate of oranges, and when a few roll and bruise, they are tossed without ceremony into a bin labelled waste. The word is a revelation with a rind. Tanaka finds him there, offers rules without threat. You can write home, postcards and 2 letters a month. You will be fed. The same calories as depot troops, around 2,800 a day. You will work 8 hours, then rest. Kiyoshi nods because the corporal's Japanese is like a good road, level, predictable, going somewhere decent. He tastes coffee once and coughs, then goes back for more because it is free, because it is there. He sleeps to engines that beat like a patient heart and wakes to the same. On the horizon, a small flotilla stages a ballet nobody applauds. Cargo nets rising, sling loads swinging, men in T-shirts moving through choreographed urgency. The boy keeps expecting the seams to show. They do not. Donnelly appears on the hatch combing, checks a roster against the faces below, and smiles in a way that says the roster will win. Somewhere between Saipan and the green ridge of Oahu, the impossible arrives hidden inside ordinary numbers. Kiyoshi hears Tanaka say that last year the United States made more than 96,000 aircraft, 1 year, 1 country, and that there are more than 23,000 of the Higgins boats hauling the world across water. A single factory back home cast rifles by the tens of thousands, while his island scraped for grenades. The statistics don't feel like boasting, they feel like the deck under his feet, quiet and solid, going where it's supposed to go. Dawn lifts on an island ringed by surf and infrastructure. Trucks idle in straight lines. A nurse's white cap flashes on a sun-struck pier. The ship's whistle moans, mooring lines fly, a gangway kisses steel. The orange bin dumps with a wet sigh. Kiyoshi watches the fruit slide away and is struck by the strangest thought he will carry home for the rest of his life. A nation that can afford to throw oranges away can afford to keep its promises. He has not yet seen the gulch the GIs call Hell Valley. He already doubts the name. July 24th, 1945, Honolulu, Oahu. Heat stands in the gulch like a living thing, red clay shining where trucks have made it hard. Barbed wire hums in the breeze. A signboard chalked in a tidy hand lists tomorrow's vaccination schedule as if it were a church social. Kiyoshi steps into a line that smells of steam and soap and hears the clatter of trays like rain on tin. When his turn comes, the ladle lifts a mountain of white rice and drops it with a satisfying slump that says, "The rules have changed." He hesitates. The cook grins without malice and adds fish, a slice of pork, a wedge of orange. Donnelly stands to the side, counting spoons into and out of the mess hall, a ritual that means the day will end with the same number it began. 2 kitchens here, each able to feed 1,000 and more, and the numbers run like a well-drilled formation. intake, delousing, issue of clothing, meal, rest. A corporal reads out the Geneva Convention as if reading bus times, Article 11, rations equal to depot troops. The clerkly tone is not a disguise, it is a promise kept on paper and on plates. A soccer ball arcs over the dust, and boys chase it as if their knees remember what laughter feels like. Nurses in khaki and white caps, one with a pencil tucked behind her ear, stand over a crate stamped EGGS and ask about temperature logs. Lieutenant Ruth Alvarez looks like the kind of person who has never lost to a thermometer. She nods once, writes a note, and the crate becomes breakfast. Kiyoshi chews and feels his body register the news. There will be seconds. He studies the rifles slung at the gate. The guards' M1 Garands are not exotic. They are sturdy, the kind of weapon that must exist by the million to make this much calm possible. The 8-round clips ping when empty, and Kiyoshi finds the sound somehow reassuring. He tries the English word thank you on his tongue and swallows it, uncertain who deserves it. A boy, even smaller than he is, asks if it is allowed to write. Tanaka appears, leads them to a table, sets down postcards pre-printed with bland phrases that can carry the required truth. I am alive. The ink pools, the letters waver, and a different kind of bridge goes up silently between two islands. When the meal is over, a whistle blows, the trays stack like shingles, and the ladles keep moving. As the sun drops, the gulch glows like a kiln, and Kiyoshi thinks, if this is hell, it has a peculiar sense of humour. August begins with a pencil tapping stainless steel, a small staccato that sounds, to anyone who has served under inspection, like Judgment Day. Lieutenant Ruth Alvarez slides a thermometer into the heart of a roast and waits with the stillness of a sniper. The needle settles. She makes a face halfway between a frown and math. Fresh eggs tomorrow, she says to the mess sergeant, and writes it down. Nothing in this camp changes because someone feels like changing it. Things change because a form says they must. Rumours swirl as rumours do. Someone claims letters are a trap. Someone else swears that anyone who admits capture will be punished on repatriation. Tanaka answers with a bulletin board and translation steady as a plumb line. Article 11, Geneva Convention of 1929. Food equivalent to depot troops. Authorised 4 postcards and 2 letters monthly. Work details set at 8 hours. Medical inspections routine. He reads it out twice, then posts it at mess and bathhouse. The rumour dies the way small fires die when they run out of air. Alvarez inspects the ice lockers, the pantry shelves, the hand-washing buckets that make the difference between a quiet camp and an outbreak. She has Tripler Army Hospital at her back, and that means standards with teeth. She circles a number here, initials a log there, and the next day a truck arrives with crates stamped EGGS and ORANGES, as if the pencil had cast a spell. Kiyoshi eats something poached and rich, and feels his body tilt toward health. Donnelly watches the dance from the perimeter and, for the first time since he landed, understands that kindness here is not improvisation. It is doctrine with check boxes. He thought mercy was a matter of good hearts. It turns out to be a matter of thermometers, ladles, forms in triplicate, and a supply chain that does not accept the word almost. The soccer league organises itself the way organisms do when nutrients are plentiful. A line of boys forms outside the male table. A nurse teaches a kid to say orange without turning it into a question. The camp smells less like dust and more like starch and soap. Alvarez files her report with the smooth, flat satisfaction of a job done according to spec. By the book, she says, and the phrase lands in Kiyoshi's ears like a hymn. That night the gulch radiates stored heat, the cicadas take first watch, and a signboard lists tomorrow's vaccination hours in the careful hand of a competent clerk. The schedule looks, to boys who expected to die unseen, like a future. Late August, a canvas tent with walls rolled up to invite any breeze that might still exist at midday. Chalk dust hangs in humid air. Tanaka draws 2 bars on a board, one tall enough to feel impolite, one stunted, and writes under the first, United States, aircraft 1944, approximately 96,000 plus. Under the second, Japan, total war years fewer. He doesn't linger. He steps to the side and breaks a Hershey bar into thirds with reverence, as if illustrating another theorem, abundance multiplies. Kiyoshi listens with the politeness of someone who has outlived certainty. Tanaka does not gloat. He narrates, 23,000 and change Higgins boats, 36 feet each, 12-knot workhorses, 5,468,000 M1 Garrans rolling out across a continent, mess halls here built to serve 1,000 plus apiece, twice over, calories calculated to match depot troops, 2,800 on paper, and, judging by the line for seconds, on the plate. He links each number to a thing Kiyoshi has felt, the ping of an empty clip that still promises a reload, the casual offer of coffee, the quiet authority of a schedule that never lies. Donnelly leans against a tent pole with his cap low, listening to his own education. He used to believe in mercy the way you believe in a neighbour's good nature. Now he sees it differently, scaled. A nation that can feed prisoners this well while feeding divisions ashore is not being sentimental. It is being consistent with itself. Alvarez slips in, checks a chart tacked to the pole, weight gains noted in tidy pencil, and nods to the bars as if they were lab results. Kiyoshi raises his hand, a schoolboy after all. How many boats? He asks, needing to hear it land again in the room they all share. 23,358, Tanaka says, and the specificity turns the abstract into a plank you can step on. How many rifles? More than 5.4 million. Impossible a month ago, ordinary today, like finding an orange at lunch. The chalk squeaks one last line. Law plus logistics equals trust. Tanaka underlines it and erases the equals, then writes wins. No one claps. The afternoon makes its slow, hot way across the gulch. Outside, a whistle sends boys trotting toward work details. Inside, a bar of chocolate disappears with the solemnity of communion. Kiyoshi touches the tall chalk bar and leaves a ghost of powder on his fingertip. This is why you win, he thinks. Not because you hate better, but because you can count higher and deliver what you promise. The tent smells like sugar and dust. Somewhere a ladle lifts, and the camp inhales together. Early September, the loudspeaker crackles the only word that can make a camp hold its breath. Mail. Paper smells like starch and dust when it's new, like rain and hope when fingers sweat. Kiyoshi lines up with the other boys beneath a tarpaulin that snaps in the trade wind, eyes fixed on a canvas sack as if it were a well giving water. Donnelly stands near the table as quiet as a fence post, watching hands shake, watching shoulders square. A rumour had said letters were a trap. Rumours don't read regulations. Tanaka does. He lays out postcards pre-printed with bland mercy, I am alive, and explains again that 4 postcards and 2 letters a month are authorised under the 1929 convention. The words would have sounded like magic in a cave. Here they sound like policy. The nurse with the pencil behind her ear, Alvarez, turns from the line long enough to check vaccination cards stacked into a small city of order. Weight notations would have shown gain in tidy half kilos, a quiet scoreboard of calories redeemed. A boy asks how to write to a mother who told him to die first. Tanaka answers nothing for a long breath, then says, "Tell her you are healthy," a phrase that could mean many things, and none of them shame if she wants it that way. Kiyoshi writes slowly, as if each stroke might snap. The nib blots. He does not blot it back. The blot proves the hand was shaking and the hand was his. Behind the tent, a soccer ball thumps like a heartbeat. The mess detail hauls sacks of rice that look like furniture. Donnelly counts spoons out and in as if the war depends on it. Maybe it does. The line moves, a kitchen whistle blows. Somewhere a ladle lifts, somewhere a rumour dies, starved of oxygen. Kiyoshi folds the postcard and sees his name, Roman letters added by a clerk to make the voyage easier. Nakashima. He wonders if his mother will trace the shape of an A with her finger and feel the angle of a future. The truck coughs to life and the canvas sack disappears into its steel throat. The boys who wrote stand very still, as if breaking the moment might spook the letter away from its journey. Donnelly finally says, "All right, not because anything is wrong, but because routines need their punctuation." Alvarez notes tomorrow's inspection on a clipboard, a small war against entropy already scheduled. Tanaka watches the dust, then tells a joke so gentle it doesn't disturb the air. Kiyoshi wipes sweat with the back of his hand and tastes a ghost of orange. He can't decide whether hope is a feeling or a timetable. The truck's tailgate slams. The sound is a period that promises a next sentence. Mid-September unbuckles the heat by degrees, but the gulch still holds it like a kiln. In the mess yard, a crate of fruit loses its fight with the afternoon and turns soft at the edges. The cook lifts a lid, tests with a thumb, shrugs the way men shrug when their schedules forgive mistakes. Into the discard bin they go, thudding like ripe hearts. Kiyoshi watches, unable to look away. He grew up in a world where waste was a sin, payable in hunger. Here it would have been Tuesday. Alvarez arrives with her satchel that sounds like a toolbox, because it is one. She checks the ice locker, tinny breath of cold, confirms the temperature log, initials a line. The routine would have been boring if its consequences weren't so beautiful. Fewer coughs, fewer infections, boys whose ribs look less like a xylophone. She is not sentimental about it. She believes in the arithmetic of health. Calories in, disease down, labour steady. Tanaka slides up with a translation for anyone who needs to understand why the crate died. Storage limits, supply cadence, priorities laddered to the needs of depot troops first and prisoners in parallel. In parallel would have sounded like poetry to a cave. Donnelly watches the bin with the shrug of a man who has seen more trucks than sunsets this year. Spoilage is baked into the system. The cost is planned for. Waste is not a failure. It is a side effect of abundance. He doesn't say that out loud because it's not the kind of thing you say in a place where boys are still learning how to trust their next meal, but he feels it in his knuckles. He will tell his father someday that logistics has a doctrine that tastes like oranges. Kiyoshi asks if he can take one that isn't gone yet. The cook waves him in with a ladle. The boy lifts an orange like an artifact and does not eat it. He wants, for reasons he couldn't name, to keep it entire. Proof that a day existed when fruit was thrown away because there would be more tomorrow. He wedges it gently in his footlocker beside the postcard stencil and a button someone gave him, a small museum of the impossible. Evening comes with the dust, and the camp smells like starch, soap and something sweet that isn't quite sugar. The soccer ball picks up a scar and keeps its shape. Alvarez schedules a follow-up because tomorrow is when you prove today wasn't luck. Tanaka tells a story about a town in California where oranges fall and nobody notices until they slip on them. Kiyoshi doesn't laugh. He presses the fruit to his nose and memorizes the exact brightness of its skin, a colour he will carry through every grey day that follows. Late September gives up a wind that could have been mercy. In a low hut that smells faintly of soap and pencil shavings, Tanaka sets 2 cups on a table and places a dictionary between them like a truce flag. The questions are the same questions every day, because that is how you build a lattice strong enough to hold truth. Unit, position, weapons, routes. Kiyoshi answers the way a boy would answer when no one is shouting at him. He names the cave entrances, describes the way the limestone sweats, mentions a cache that would have been important in June and is irrelevant now. Tanaka's yes is the softest sound in the room. Donnelly pokes his head in and steps back without speaking. Paperwork will follow. Paperwork is the wake behind every conversation here, the proof that words travelled as far as they needed to. Alvarez crosses the doorway later, checks a chart, weight trending up, fever trending down, and nods to herself. A system that can feed and heal can also listen without cruelty. The connection is not accidental. It is design. Tanaka keeps the pace unhurried. He explains, when he has to, that the student corps of Iron and Blood wasn't unique, that many boys were pressed into service with a rifle older than their hands. He never uses the word child. He asks about the Type 89 and calls it by its nickname knee mortar, then carefully warns that the nickname broke legs when men believed it. Kiyoshi smiles without humour. He has seen that lesson taught with bruises. Numbers wait their turn, as they always do, to break a mind gently. Tanaka unfolds a small map and taps the edge where the sea is. 23,358 boats like the ones you saw, he says conversationally, as if discussing weather. In 1 year we made more airplanes than your nation made in the whole war. He keeps his voice level because ore should arrive like a tide, not like a slap. The boy's eyes track from map to cup to Tanaka's hands, as if the truth might be hiding in a gesture. The fan stutters and the cups collect a rim of condensation. Outside, a whistle splits the air. Inside, Tanaka stamps complete in a red that would have meant death on another day, and here means done. Kiyoshi pushes back from the table and bows, because there is no other language for what has just happened. A conversation that did not humiliate him, a statistic that did not gloat, a process that did not hurt. He steps into the wind and finds it cooler than he expected. Somewhere in the mess hall, a ladle rises. Somewhere in a file room, a page finds its folder, and the war moves 1 inch closer to being over. Early October draws shadows sharp, and the office smells like coffee left too long and paper that has learned patience. Donnelly sits at a grey metal desk with a map of Operation Iceberg pinned beneath a pane of glass that wobbles when the door shuts. He has a pencil, 2 erasers, and the kind of trust in arithmetic you inherit from planting seasons. His ledger is not elegant, it is honest. US casualties on Okinawa, roughly 48,000. Killed, wounded, missing. Enemy dead, recovered bodies, around 142,000, a number that lands heavy without triumph. He copies carefully, because copying is a kind of respect. Along the margin, he writes the numbers that changed what those numbers meant. Aircraft produced by the United States in 1944 alone, more than 96,000. Higgins boats built, 23,358. Rifles, M1, Garand, 5,468,772. He does not circle them. He lets them sit there like hills on a map, features you plan around because you can't pretend they aren't there. He thinks of Alvarez setting a thermometer and of Tanaka's chalk making sense of a world that used to be rumour. He thinks of the boy who carried a primer in his tunic and tries to imagine writing letters from a cave. His pencil scratches a note he won't send home but wants to remember. We fed even our enemies. He underlines it once and watches the graphite shine. Feeding was not charity. It was an exhibition of capacity that the enemy could taste. Through the open door he catches the camp's rhythms, ladle, whistle, bawl, laugh, and feels a homesick tug so brief it wears a uniform. The ledger pages curl slightly, as if trying to rise from the desk. He flips one and writes repatriation prep in a plain hand, then adds dates in pencil he can erase if orders change. Paper will carry boys out the way boats carried them in. The symmetry pleases him. He writes his father a letter in the margin of his day. Tell Ma the oranges are real. Tell the pastor that mercy takes trucks. Tell the boys at the elevator that a clean form is a kind of weapon. He doesn't know if any of that will make sense back in Iowa, but here, with the map under glass and the numbers steady as fence posts, it feels like the truth. The office clock clicks forward. He caps his pencil and reaches for the next page because the ledger is long and the war is hurrying toward its period. Late October leans into November, and the bulletin board becomes the most dangerous place in camp. Dangerous because it can break the heart with joy. Names go up under a thumbtack's authority, letters making their slow parade toward a gangway that smells of rope and tar. Kiyoshi finds his family name the way a thirsty man finds a pump handle and stares until the strokes blur. Donnelly stands beside the list to keep order, which would have been unnecessary if Hope obeyed lines the way rations do. Alvarez runs the final rituals with a nurse's devotion to endings done right. Temperature, weight, vision, vaccination, a series of small permissions that add up to the word ready. She notes gains with the quiet pride of a forest. Health is a crop, and this field yielded. Tanaka translates embarkation instructions that read like the start of a school term: times, places, what to bring, what to surrender. He passes out a last set of postcards for boys who need one more sentence to close the circle. The yards hum. A truck rattles over the gulch's ribs. MP hand signals do choreography in the sun. The ship at the pier wears its grey like duty instead of threat. Somewhere in the stack, a boiler breathes. Kiyoshi carries his small museum, postcard stencil, a button, the orange now hard and fragrant as a memory fossil. He thinks, absurdly, of how an orange gets from tree to table, and realizes the answer is the same as how a boy gets from cave to gangway: schedules, vehicles, men with clipboards whose authority is kindness in uniform. Donnelly counts spoons out and in for the last meal of the last day and gets his match. He doesn't cheer. He signs a line and writes a time because that is how you bless a departure here. Tanaka tells Kiyoshi, gently, that paradise is a word a poet would use. The correct term is camp that worked as designed. The boy nods and decides those phrases are not enemies. As the line inches, he breathes the smell he has learned to associate with safety: soap, starch, oranges, and puts each into memory like ammunition. At the bottom of the gangway, Alvarez touches his shoulder, a gesture that would not have been possible a month ago. "Be well," she says, and the imperative feels like a benediction. The ship takes him the way ships take everything, without drama, with mathematics. Lines off, fenders in, wake spreading like a clean page. Kiyoshi looks back into the gulch once, twice, and then it is behind him, not because it vanished, but because forward existed and demanded feet. The war ends in signatures and trains and slow ships, but memory ends when it feels like ending. Years later, a postcard curls at the corner in a drawer and still smells faintly of dust and orange. Kiyoshi would have told his children that a gulch the Americans called Hell Valley made him healthy, and he would have said it without shame because facts do not bow. He would have said they fed us like depot troops, and that phrase would have sounded like a foreigner's prayer sworn in a language that kept its verbs on time. Donnelly goes home with a ledgerman's faith that neat columns can mend what mud broke. He would have explained to anyone who asked that a thermometer and a worksheet can defeat entropy the way a rifle and a line can defeat a charge. Alvarez trains new nurses to set their standards like fence posts and to believe that calories are a treatment. She does not romanticize the work. She dignifies it by being exact. Tanaka builds a life in the gap between two flags and never forgets that a dictionary on a table and 2 cups of coffee can end a war an inch at a time. The numbers, when they are retold, still do the quiet violence of awe. In a single year, the United States built more aircraft than an enemy made across the entire war. One class of boat counted 23,000 hulls. Rifles left one factory at a rate that would have outpaced a nation's total capacity. There were days when American production in hours surpassed what the enemy could scrape together in months. Impossible is just a word people use before they see the spreadsheet. What do we choose to remember? The ping of an empty clip that promised a reload, the metallic clatter of trays, a ladle that never slowed, a clipboard that made tomorrow predictable. We remember that mercy here was not a feeling. It was the result of policy turning into practice, doctrine enforced with kindness and backed by trains, ships, factories, and the unglamorous heroism of counting. We remember that abundance, offered without swagger to captured boys, undermined a story that demanded death before surrender. Kiyoshi keeps the orange, hard as a stone and bright as a lesson. Donnelly keeps his pencil, worn to a stub. Alvarez keeps her thermometer, calibrated and clean. Tanaka keeps the chalk. Together they are artifacts of an answer to the century's ugliest question. How do free people defeat those who worship force alone? They do it by measuring and delivering, by promising and keeping. They do it by feeding the enemy's children until